So you'll be able to give us some insight here. We have some of your fellow countrymen, Gary Bowerbank playing Chris Hinkes on Adam. Again, another Adam game.
Yeah, Gary.
So Gary playing HB ETF, Chris playing Adam. We just saw this in the last round. We saw Adam versus CTM. So it should be interesting.
And he's using the new directive there, Find the Truth as well.
Yeah.
So
it's been a pretty effective one.
I've heard a little bit about this deck that Chris Hinkes is playing, and sounds like the most solid Adam build I've seen anyone do.
Yeah, I mean, we had 2 Adams in the top in the second day yesterday. So playing the same list apparently as Timmy from the last round. So yeah, Finding the Truth, really good at giving you information. I think looks like his draw is a little bit better than Timmy had. Timmy ended up getting slowed down a little bit by CTM as is expected.
I think this is much easier matchup than CTM.
Absolutely.
I think like you can take advantage of always be running. Or does he have that in? No, he's got the other 2 down.
So hedge fund. Some of you may be more familiar with it as rigged. So Gary's ETF.
Yep.
Any idea how that's going to look?
I do not. I mean, it could just be standard sort of food coats or rush list. I've seen some very interesting ETF lists from the other Brits, so we'll see what happens.
Well, it looks like he's got a Turing in there at least.
Yeah.
So Chris gets some money, runs at R&D, and then drops down bigger hand size in any 3. So we expect to see the Overminds again.
Yep. I think that's fairly smart with double ice on HQ, although maybe telegraphs that there's at least one agenda stuck in there.
Right.
Like, you don't want Adam getting an early to HQ, and it's an easy target. So.
Yeah. But here you go, Jackson maybe cleaning up some of that flood.
Yeah, I would hope so.
We do see a Vitruvius, a wall of static. I wasn't sure what those alt arts were. But so he'll just Jackson
just
twice.
Going all the way up, yeah.
Oh, he's got a Caprice.
Caprice, so definitely looks like food coats.
Just glaciering up, trying to score out. But are those Breaker Bay alt arts?
Any
idea?
Don't
they
looked know.
Look interesting. But Chris, of course, just gonna Temujin. It's gonna be some free money and looks at R&D.
Yeah. I don't know the list fully, but do you know if there's any R&D multi-access in it? Oh, Temujin archives though.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I suppose he wants to keep it, so he's got the option to take money later after R&D.
I think
gets
he would
iced.
run R&D first.
Yeah.
Okay. No, he'll find the truth to see what's on top. Pop Jackson.
Ah, right. Yep.
So even if it was an agenda that he saw on top,
there's no way he's getting it.
There's no way he's getting it. Yeah, I would have thought maybe he would run R&D first as a result, but I guess it's not maybe exceptionally relevant. Yeah, Timmy was running 2 RDIs, I think, in his.
Okay.
At least one. We saw one. So that's the multi-access. He's running day jobs.
Right. Okay.
Armitage code busting, daily casts. And all we saw for breakers was Overmind in E3.
Well, if you're planning on not using or turning off your always be running, then day job becomes a reasonable card to play in Adam.
Yeah.
Certainly. Now,
so there's an Architect, a Turing, what I assume is a Breaker Bay grid in hand. So
just trying to cut off that money.
Cut off the Temujin. It's really been one of the stories of the weekend is that we don't see any criminals really, but we've seen a lot of Temujin.
Yeah, it's interesting. That card sees so much play in Anarch now, and their Breaker Suite being so efficient, I think, is what pushes it over. With Criminal, it's kind of difficult once they start icing to actually still profit from the Temujin money. Yeah, if you have Yolk going, anything like that.
Yeah, Nick suggested that maybe Temujin should have been 3. I think a lot of people have been saying that.
I don't know. This is interesting. I've thought about this a bit, and my problem is if you make it too much influence, then Criminal becomes the only deck you can play when Temujin is good. So,
yeah. Okay, so we see Adam's console. For those of you who aren't familiar with Adam or haven't seen it in forever, as many have not, it increases his hand size by the number of agendas he's stolen, essentially, the point value of the agendas he's stolen.
And also your MU by the same amount.
Right.
It's obviously very good with safety first, start drawing up naturally.
And he's going to be trying to fire this Find the Truth to find those agendas off the top of R&D. That's sort of the goal of this deck, but Gary doing a great job of covering everything up.
That is a bit of a painful face check.
Architect, yeah. So he will get to see what Gary leaves on top here.
Yeah, it's an interesting interaction, actually.
Yeah. But it doesn't look like it's an agenda on top, so I think Gary might be content to let it sit.
Yeah, this is really quite good because it's effectively neutralizing the Find the Truth effect for this turn at least.
Oh, but it is a GFI. Now that is interesting.
Okay.
He can just, he can afford to leave the GFI on top because he knows Chris would have to run through whatever ice he's put up there. And it looks like he did put an Ichi down in front.
Oh, upgrade on the R&D.
An upgrade. Yeah. So maybe Chrisium grid.
Because he's going to see that agenda.
So he'll see the GFI. He'll get Temujin money. So plenty of money here for Chris, but
yeah,
he hasn't found the pieces yet. He needs to find that Overmind. He would like to steal an agenda or two before he does that.
Yeah.
But he is just going to run right into the Ichi. Oh, no, not an Ichi. Fairchild 3.
That
okay.
is painful.
So I was mistaken. That's, yeah, a Fairchild 3. That's going to be rough. The upside is playing
he has
Adam.
Credits to pay.
Yeah, he has credits to pay.
Absorb the 6.
But he could even really afford to lose. Maybe the E3.
Now, do you think Gary should 5 a brain damage or overrun?
One of the directives. That's tough. I think knowing you're playing against Adam, at some point his hand size is going to be bigger than 5 anyways.
At some point, but
I wouldn't bother.
Hitting it down to 2 early is pretty powerful. I guess it depends what's behind.
Well, he's got a public sympathy out as well.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So
yeah. Okay, good point.
And he knows it's an agenda on top, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, interesting. So he pays 3 and then loses the Temujin. I think that's fine.
Yep.
And then Gary ends the run, it looks like.
Now, just in general, I want to say that if Chris Hinkes doesn't get any early agendas, it's going to be very difficult for him to sort of swing any late game pressure, especially with this sort of Overmind brain chip build.
And especially seeing Turing here, which turns out is pretty good against Overmind.
You get slightly more efficient, goes through it if you have always been running down at least.
Right.
But even then, 3 clicks to make a run.
Yeah, and I think that's the decision that they're having to make, these Adam players, is which directives are good, because they're all better in certain matchups. And I had one person tell me that he doesn't want to play always be running ever against ETF because of all of the click intensifiers.
Yeah, you just end up face checking their ice, and it's pretty painful. And it's so awkward against CTM as well. Right. So I think a lot of the time in the current sort of standard metagame, that's what you take out.
Yeah.
Of course, somewhere like here, where you've got guaranteed, very even metagame, different corps showing up.
Right.
I think you'll see a bit more use of always be running.
So he's going to bounce from Turing, and then looks like he's going to run HQ, knowing
just see that
Gary can't res and only see wall of static. So safety first draws him in Armitage code busting, and it's back to Gary. He's going to. Okay, so that altar was not Breaker Bay Grid. Something else, because that's Breaker Bay Grid right there, and an Eve.
I mean, that should be the Caprice on R&D that he had earlier.
Yeah. Forgot we had seen that. Didn't see what he mandatory drew, but with 2 credits, it's hard to think that he's going to be doing anything other than taking money. He'll draw for quick 1. I suppose Chris at this point knows there's an agenda in hand. And
yeah, exactly. And he sees both when he goes in, so.
And he's gotten in before, and without money, it's going to be hard for Gary to res more than at least 1 piece of ice. So drawing helps dilute a little bit, and then Chris is going to have to make a decision on whether or not 4 credits is enough for Gary to res something in front of HQ.
Yeah. I mean, another Architect face check here was pretty devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. He's already gotten essentially the free Eve campaign out of it, and the Fairchild install.
I think you might be going for it, yep.
Yep, there it is. So there's the always be running that we were talking about.
Now you can still click for an Eli here.
Right.
So
it's going to be a wall of static. All right, so he'll get through. So he's 1 in 3 shot, and he'll see the top of R&D. He'll see the Ichi on top of R&D. Ooh, and he'll just see the other wall of static.
That's unfortunate.
Well, it's good to be able to get rid of that Adonis. And with only Eve online, Gary's drip is going to be slow.
Yeah.
But Chris now seeing a drug dealer, that's really going to be good for him to accelerate his draw as well.
Now again, I've got a question about the list. Do you know if there's any Faust in here? Or
we didn't see any in the game.
Because that's another powerful AI breaker. You can play with these draw engines. You've got safety first, and you've got drug dealer going, and huge hand size.
And in the deck side, I played I saw one Adam game yesterday that was playing Faust. But based on what we saw from Timmy Wong, and if this list is identical, then I have to assume it's not there. And unfortunately, again, with Turing up, Gary has to be feeling pretty good about that remote.
Yeah.
But Chris gonna use always be running to go in there and trash the Eve in the Breaker Bay grid.
Now they're both fairly, relatively poor.
Yeah.
Chris still on 8 credits, but with all of that ice resed, that's not really a great situation for Chris to be in, I think.
Yeah. And another sure gamble.
Yep. And a career fair.
Career fair.
I think that might be a second career fair in hand now, but no good targets.
Yeah, there's already one Temujin gone. And Drug Dealer obviously installed it. One, so. Gary, on the other hand, still needs to find some money. He's got ice for days, and he's installed what I think is an Adonis. I think we saw that on the Architect fire. Yeah, and it seems like Chris has a lot of good Faust targets as well. For instance, we see a New Angeles City Hall in this deck.
Which you don't need like in this matchup certainly. And
so, but we haven't
seen it. We'll see if that turns up later. I mean, with this always be running, I think he probably just chooses to bounce off one of these servers. It's possible you want to go for the remote. I mean, if he doesn't protect it, just click through, see what that is. Because if it is economy, you probably want to kill it anyway.
So with 3 cards in hand, Chris is deciding whether or not it's worth it to run HQ. He'll run the remote, thinking that maybe Gary is trying to sneak out the GFI. Gary will not res. So Chris can just
you can spend 2 clicks and see what it is, or nope, just bouncing off.
Bounce off.
Wants to get some more money.
Yeah, he's
That's
got
a fair choice.
He's got more than a full hand, so.
Yeah, if he goes through and hits an Adonis, then he's on low credits, he can't play his gamble.
So he'll play the gamble. Now, do you run back here?
Can't get in if he runs back, right?
Oh, right, yeah, that's
not good enough clicks.
And the always be running isn't going to be relevant. So
Plus
just Armitage, a lot of money.
Draws freedom.
And that's fine. With the drug dealer, with the
Yeah.
drug dealer and safety first, he's got plenty of draw. He just needs money in the pieces.
Yeah. This is fine anyway for Chris because, I mean, ideally you want to trash Adonis for turn after res it anyway. That's where it's, worse for the corp.
And so Gary not going to be feeling great about this res, but sort of needed it. He needs that money.
Of course, now he might have enough to res the outermost out.
Yeah, we're still not sure what that is. Draws a Cyberdeck Spider Suite, it looks like. Yep. Putting it on HQ.
Yep.
Getting the HB credit. And then taking 1 more credit. So yeah, sitting on 8. Toll Booth, DNA Tracker. These are all live now.
Yeah. Okay.
But Chris is going to go for it. It is a ball of static. Okay.
All right. Just stops him clicking through.
So both players are going to be happy with that. Chris less happy to leave the Adonis up, but forcing more ice res. And a Turing again.
Those are 2 pretty strong sets of ice against
Adam, certainly, especially if it's just Overmind. We have to assume there's some other breakers in there, but what they are, I'm not sure. So a second public sympathy.
Just going to use that career fair to save 2 credits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely think Gary has the liberty to just play a very defensive game at the moment and, protect his agendas. Don't let Hinkes get that memory brain chip online and then when he's ready, build a huge remote.
Right. And with 2 ETRs and 2 Turings out on HQ and a remote respectively, it's going to be really hard for Chris to get information unless he's walking through that Architect, which of course he's not going to do.
And of course, with this, incredibly well spread set of ice, Find the Truth just hasn't been triggering at all.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so Chris, I imagine, just spends every first click now running Wall of Static until he finds a Jack Sinclair. I would assume is somewhere in this deck. It's what we saw yesterday from the 2 Adam players in the top 96, I think.
Yep.
But haven't seen it in either of these games from either Chris or Timmy. Haven't even seen an icebreaker in this game yet for Chris. So he's struggling right now.
This is where I'm going to admit to my inexperience with Adam. Can you always be running more than once per turn to break? If you use a Jack Sinclair run, can you then click through and click through?
I don't believe you can. I believe it is just the 1 time. So not going to help him a whole lot here.
So even then, those remotes are still impenetrable.
And so he has money. He's sitting on 12 credits. He has an Armitage installed, but doesn't really have anywhere to go on this first click. But he might just click through Fairchild and see what that second piece of ice is. Or okay.
and E3.
Right. So he'll break one with always be running.
Reasonable. And trash. He always
trash.
Running.
He'll trash always be running, which allows him to then use the E3 to break the final credit.
Oh.
A neat play, unfortunately, not going to be helpful when there is a second Fairchild immediately thereafter. So Chris going to lose one of the public sympathies, which is fine. Right now, I think he's right at.
Still on a safe amount of credits to pay free if he wants to.
Right.
But he's just got to think about his options.
I think the only other real trash is maybe neutralize all threats. You don't want to get rid of your drug dealer right now. It's drawing you cards.
Really, no.
Same with safety first. And I don't know how many E3s he runs, and you never want to trash your influence if you don't have to. So he's sitting on, I think, 6 cards in hand, maybe even 7. He will have to discard if he doesn't play them. But really a relatively, Scrubber. Really a relatively slow early game from both of these players.
Yeah.
No agenda scored yet. We've only seen, I think, the 1 in Gary's hand at one point, which got Jackson's back.
It's going to be very interesting to see if Chris can swing this back into any sort of pressure in the late game.
Yeah. With Scrubber out, he has the ability to trash these econ assets, but he's got to get into that server first, and that's really proving to be the difficulty here.
It does just help a lot, making neutralize all threats a lot softer on you, though.
Right. I think that was probably the logic behind it.
Yeah.
I think they might even be playing 2 of in this deck.
Yeah. It's a good include at 1 influence when you try to build these mini faction decks.
Absolutely.
Just looking for all those cheap cards that you can slot in.
Yeah, and that was the discussion I had with Nick, is that we like seeing more of these mini faction cards come out, but they have to be careful with that, not to make them too powerful with the amount of influence they have.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So seeing one or 2 per cycle it's promising. Some promising signs. Adam, obviously, the only one of the 3 that's really playable right now at a high level.
Yeah, we had some day 2s at Worlds apparently. So.
But Sunny, I think, is close. It's getting there. So hopefully we'll continue to see that trend. Gary, on his turn, is just going to install Jackson and an Ice and continue to draw cards. He's getting to the point eventually here where he'll have money to start jamming out.
Yeah, I think maybe when that Adonis clears, it's time to start building that remote into something you can score out of.
But he will be forced to pop that Jackson to send back the global food. It looks like the other Adonis and the Eve. But on only 5 credits, he'll be at 8 when that clears, 9 when he installs something. He might just install, I think he has another Adonis in hand.
Yeah.
So he might just install that. Of course, he would love to see another Breaker Bay.
And I mean, as soon as you peg that this Adam deck is likely to have an AI breaker in it,
of course,
then you know that your remotes are never really as secure as they look.
Yeah. Well, with Turing out though, you have to feel okay about it until they find the second breaker or whatever the case may be. Because at this point, we see no real way for Chris to get into that remote.
Just another take money turn.
Yeah, it looks that way. So install what I think is the other Adonis and then take 2 credits. Now, ironically, after using the career fair to install Scrubber and Public Sympathy, we see another.
Got another Temujin there, yeah.
Yeah, another Temujin in hand.
Now,
but also a day job.
Yeah,
he'll just do that.
Now, it might be worth maybe putting Temujin on that extra remote that Gary's now got.
Yeah, with nothing in it.
It's unres dice and at least protected by the servers. So. There's Adonis.
Yep. Now, does that mean you think that next remote becomes your scoring server? Or do you just wait until you're ready to fire and then maybe trash the Adonis or let it run out and then use that server?
That is a good question. I think you don't want to try and build 2 good remotes, and that Adonis remote has a good start to it. That's the thing.
That ice
you want to use that wall starting with mature and build on them, rather than trying to start again, effectively.
Right. Especially with an Ichi in hand. Well, there's a breaker, but with an Ichi in hand, if you can drop that in front of those 2 pieces of ice, that becomes
that's very strong.
A pretty strong threat.
2 Overminds.
Yeah.
That's the first one.
So only 3 tokens on it now, because no one has scored an agenda.
Yep. I mean, with the free feedback implants, that's effectively 3 pieces of ice he's going to break.
Right.
And then have to find, I guess he's hoping to find an agenda using this first Overmind and then chain that into the second.
Well, and that can be very strong. We know most of the agendas are still in R&D, so if he can get in there and get rid of that Caprice, that will do some good work for him.
Getting through those 2 Fairchilds is still not fun.
Yeah.
That is, you know, a very taxing R&D still.
Yeah, Overmind's not too happy to see a stacked Fairchild 3, so Gary will just start scoring out.
There we go.
With the
just
biotic.
Just a Vitruvius, though.
Yep. And at this point, even if it's an ABT,
yeah, you wouldn't fire in
it.
this situation, definitely not.
Too much ice out already. So, Chris, you have to wonder where he's going to sort of target that first R&D, or that first Overmind, as you said.
I mean, do you maybe read the fact that Gary just scored an agenda as a fact that he might have, you know, a few in hand still?
Yeah. I think with our information we know, it's just that he was waiting for that biotic.
Yeah,
I think, but Chris, as you said, has to think, well, he's been drawing a lot, and he's just Jackson back.
He did Jackson some stuff back, and then still scored the agenda.
Still scored one out. So you have to think that there's probably at least one in hand. But with Turing out, it makes it that much harder to get in there.
Yeah, you're effectively spending almost your entire time. Because you don't install, always be running, or just run through and click through.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in this situation, just clicking through the Turing might be correct, because you really don't want that always be running firing on all your other turns.
Well,
even if it helps.
And he trashed always be running to one of the Fairchilds, remember?
I believe he has a second one in hand now. I believe
he does. Okay, right. So I was going to say he was going to have to draw it. I didn't see it. Yeah, and so I think this was the other question: is he draws the RDI, he can install it, but again, as you said, that's a tough server to get into.
Tough R&D.
He does have money for it with E3, but you essentially need to see an agenda in those first 2 accesses.
Yeah.
Not to mention the Caprice sitting there.
I find it kind of interesting that this list has RDI and Find the Truth in it.
Yeah.
Because that almost seems like you're overlapping a little bit. But I suppose sometimes you just see an agenda and then get lucky and hit 2.
Right. I think that's the idea behind it. Unfortunately, we've seen, a single Find the Truth firing, really?
I think it fired maybe a couple of times at the start of the game, but very, very rare.
But yeah, the first turn with Temujin, the first time he had Temujin installed was really the only relevant fire.
Yeah.
Where he got to see
that food, but then got immediately very well protected.
Yeah, have ice installed over it. So going to need some better luck here shortly. So where do you attack then if you're Adam right now?
It's a very tough decision. There are effectively no good servers, I think.
Right. And if you just wait,
he's
going
to
start
start winning
biotic.
the game.
Yeah.
That Adonis server now has a 3rd piece of ice on it. If he gets a defensive upgrade, I think it's very easy for Gary to start scoring out of that server.
Yeah, and Gary now sitting on 14 credits has all the money he needs to just go for it.
I mean, obviously we don't know what there might be in Hinkes' deck, but if there's no rumor mill, then something like Ash or Caprice is very tough against Adam, because you almost always have to spend some clicks to get in.
Yeah. Part of the reason that this RDI might not see much work this game, and so I have to question that install actually. He installs it and now he's attacking HQ. It's 4 credits you might have used. That being said,
that's the Ichi.
Not enough. Yeah. So there's one of the 2 Ichis.
So if he wants to use his Overmind on both this and the wall of static, he can get in.
Yep.
Otherwise, I think he probably just clicks through and then uses E3.
Okay, so he will use Overmind.
Which I would assume means he's going through, or else you would just spend a click and 2 credits and jack out.
I'm wondering why he spent so much money, though.
Huh? He has to pump to 4, use a counter, and then E3, E3.
Yeah, turns out Ice has a strength, and you have to match that.
Overmind also has a strength, not as high as the Ice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he will access both.
Ooh, there we go.
Corporate sales team and
a Caprice. Strong.
So that's both good and bad news, because there's already an upgrade on R&D. He has to, I think, assume that it's the other Caprice, unfortunately.
There is a bit of a bluff.
Dead card.
Yeah.
So Chris has found the first agenda.
Yep. It's
which
going
will
to make
certainly help with that second Overmind.
Yeah, definitely. There's a Beth there.
That's right. We did see Beth last game.
Beth is going to be pretty good for the rest of the game, I would expect.
Yeah.
I don't see Gary going poor again with the
the
CTF
HP
list.
matchup, certainly. Didn't see what Gary drew here. But so if you're Gary now, are you a little bit worried? Chris can get in?
Can be, yeah. Like, if you start drawing agendas, it's really awkward for you because Chris can get in, and if you have agendas in hand, he's probably going to see them.
Now, Gary doesn't know there's another Overmind coming, but
yeah,
the fact that even
I
just
think
the
he
one
would have seen both drawn.
Oh, he would have, yeah, I'll
Truth,
find the truth. So yeah, he does in fact know that another Overmind is coming, and none of these servers are really keeping him out. Though both Turings are doing an immaculate amount of work for him, which is...
And it also depends what that third ice is on the remote.
Right, and I think it's the other Ichi.
Okay.
So I think those servers are essentially identical in terms of ice composition.
And he'll need to install the second Overmind before he can get into either HQ or that server.
This is where having a savoir-faire would help.
It would. How much influence is that card, though?
Too much.
Too much.
I'm sure. And certainly not worth the 1 MU in an Overmind deck.
Yes.
So I think Chris making that determination whether or not he needs to go at this remote that Gary has just installed into or not. Is this a point where you maybe just go at R&D? You have that RDI installed. You have the one agenda.
So let's have a think. What are you spending to get into R&D? It's quite a lot, right?
5, so 10. So he can't afford it right now, for one.
Yeah.
And then plus, so you're spending 14.
So you'd spend 2 clicks and then 2 credits for the first one. And then you'd spend 5
okay,
and
that's true.
2
and that's
second.
cheaper, yeah.
But it's still,
then
it's a lot of clicks and credits.
Yeah, and there's an upgrade which you can assume is probably a
Ash or Caprice, I think. Yeah.
So with just Overmind, it would cost really too much to be worth it. So he will go back
into HQ, it looks like.
Clicking through both Ichi and Turing, maybe?
Looks like it.
Yeah, it's his whole turn.
Find the truth.
Find the truth shows.
Didn't see that, but there's the
GFI.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is looking a lot better now for Chris, all of a sudden. 2 accesses, 4 points.
And with that freedom for equality, he might only need 1 more agenda to win the game.
So I expect next turn we'll see him install the other Overmind and maybe just take money.
Yep. Build up for an R&D run, I suppose.
Second drug dealer, not really going to be useful to him.
And Dr. Lovegood.
Ah, that's what that is. We saw that in the first game, didn't see it installed.
Yep. Such a useful card.
Yeah. And I kept calling it Jack Sinclair, and that's the card I was thinking of as Dr. Lovegood.
That's why you
Sorry.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, if you just having drug dealers in the deck, that's such good synergy with Dr. Lovegood, being able to turn off the credit loss.
Well, and now with all 4 directives installed, you can turn off
whichever one you don't like. Yeah.
Don't know that there's ever really a reason to turn off Find the Truth.
If you're trying to trick your opponent, I guess.
Yeah, but it's Adam.
Fairly weak.
Yeah, feels like a fairly straightforward deck. I think Gary has seen all of its tricks at this point, aside from the freedom, which could be quite impactful.
Find the Truth has got a very interesting downside on it, right? Like, that is such a strange effect because so many games of Netrunner, you sort of expect to see your opponent's list. You play against an Andy deck, you almost know what's in that deck from the start.
But Adam is just explicitly giving it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really the only directive with, I would say, no downside.
Very little downside. I agree with that.
I think there are situations where it is relevant. I think in NBN matchups, if they're playing things like Salem's Hospitality, of course, that hurts.
Definitely.
But we haven't seen that really in the meta in huge numbers.
I think it does perhaps affect your deck construction somewhat. Maybe you don't include maybe a card like Inside Job that you might otherwise want, because that way, that is a card where you do want to surprise them.
Right.
But as we're saying, good players can just play around these cards anyway. They'll just think about it. They'll go, what if they have Inside Job? And just play around it. So
I'm a little surprised he's not installing Beth.
It's a very profitable Beth.
But with Always Be Running still online, he's got to, I guess, make this first run.
Yeah,
and he'll run
the first decision.
I think that's the correct choice. Yikes.
So have to assume that's going to be
an assassin.
He can soak the damage in the trash, right? It can only kill the Overmind, which is empty, and he's got plenty of cards in hand. It's just whether or not he cares about them.
Right. You have to assume he will care about them because one of them is the other Overmind.
Yeah, I suppose that's. Bloods for trash
and
fire.
and I haven't seen any real recursion in this deck, so makes sense. So he'll access Jackson.
Well, he won't access
right, which
Jackson.
Gary will pop. I think you take back a Caprice here, maybe. Because it's not clear whether or not Chris is going to bother running at that first Caprice. So 2 hedge funds.
2 hedge funds.
I think fine.
Yeah, that's a very solid
I think
choice.
the other question was maybe the Biotic. At this point, it seems like Biotic's going to be pretty strong in letting you score.
At the same time, I think Gary probably knows that he has to at least score 1 GFI to win this game. I don't think he's scoring out on 3-2s and Biotics alone.
Yeah,
so if you can build a remote that scores a 5-3, you can build a remote that scores a 3-2, right?
Yep. So we'll reveal what looked like a Bastion, maybe?
Definitely an Ice, and I think you might be right about Bastion. Yep.
So Chris Hinkes down to 4 credits.
There's that Love
There we go. There's the Love Good. And I think he's, I was going to say, still below hand size. So
well, his hand size is pretty big right now.
At this point, with Public Sympathy and 4 points.
The 9, right?
Yeah. And then Drug Dealer drawing him an additional card. So at this point now he needs the money. And that's going to be the difficult thing, is he's got to always be running and Drug Dealer installed. Can only blank the 1 with Love Good.
Yeah.
So he's going to be losing a credit a turn.
Yeah, I feel like it must be the always be running that you turn off at the moment. None of these remotes are good again, so, or any server, you don't want to run it.
And Scarcity, having just seen another Armitage,
that's really tough.
Will be rough. And I don't recall seeing any currents in
apart from
Timmy's
Freedom
deck.
through Equality.
Oh, right, Freedom through Equality,
But I don't. That is one you don't want to preemptively
down.
play. You want to play that when you're going to score from it. And
although now having not dropped Beth, that's
that's really
tough.
painful.
Can't even afford to install it right now. So
yeah, I mean he can take off the Armitage and then install.
Right, but paying 4 for Beth makes Beth a much worse card, I think.
This Glacier build is just locking him out really hard.
HQ now looks roughly impenetrable. It doesn't really matter what that 4th piece of ice is. So Chris has some hard decisions to make here. I think he's going to have to pay 2 for at least 1 resource. I think maybe paying.
Is he going to take
the second Armitage might
Armitage
be
first, and then you take off it so you can make your Beth still? That might be.
Yeah, that might be the play. Although, also sitting on 6 credits here, Gary's not really giving him any more than a credit a turn.
That's true.
But it only takes 2 turns of HB being
so you can
HB.
He's going to break it.
He's just going to turn it off. That's an interesting decision.
Yeah, that's very bold. I suppose if Gary wants to score an agenda without Biotic, he's going to have to trash that Eve campaign. So it's still a tough decision if he does want to get rid of Freedom for Equality before Hinkes sees an agenda, right?
Yeah.
Like that's.
Which is fair, and again, sitting on only 6 credits, that's a big ask. So Chris installs the Armitage. Yep, so it looks like he'll maybe take 2, maybe 4, and then presumably install Beth. But again, I might be wrong about that. Okay, that was his last click, actually. Yeah, so he'll just draw.
I feel like Chris is getting closer and closer to the end of his deck, though, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, this engine is doing nothing for you.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've seen a Levy. And there's certainly nothing to take care of the Drug Dealer other than Love Good.
I mean, if this was a Faust build, then I would expect there to be a Levy in there somewhere. But with if it is just Overmind, then you maybe don't expect to actually have to draw your whole deck to win the game.
Well, and if it's just Overmind, these Turrings become more and more of a problem.
Yeah.
That being said, Gary's used now all 3 Jacksons. So anything that goes in Archives is staying there. So they're both sort of on the deck clock. Gary's going to have to start scoring out at some point. But as long as there's not a 3rd Turing, which would really just certainly end the game, I think, then Chris still has a shot.
I wouldn't expect to see a 3rd Turing.
Yeah, I think it's been a long time, and 3 Turings has still been uncommon at best. But he has more money in hand, Chris. Another daily cast, or maybe the first daily cast, in fact. And Beth's still just waiting. There
it
she
is. Yeah. This is that's a very good time to be playing it.
Yeah. Yeah, Gary right now really only looking to biotic out something this next turn.
Another breaker.
But yeah, there is another breaker. So
I suppose wraparound is a concern for this deck. So
right.
although you can click through wraparound, maybe he just doesn't want to have to face like stacked barriers.
Yeah, my question is just what his answer to the Turings and the Swordsmans of the world are.
Well, with Adam, you can just click through them. That is the strength of it in a lot of ways. Always be running. That's where you really get the power from it.
And that might be the key is when he's ready to go, he just turns back on, always be running
and goes in. Yeah.
And goes in. But again, R&D, it can't really be that target with the upgrade there that he has to assume, I think, is Caprice or Ash.
I don't know if the correct plan is to maybe just try and let Gary build up some agendas in hand and then try and hammer HQ again.
Yeah.
Like, that's where you get most of your agendas as Adam when I've played him in the past. So
that makes sense. Well, there's another Temujin. But without a good target, you don't want to be spending Overmind tokens or paying Overminds.
Or paying clicks.
Temujin, yeah, it's not a good trade. But if he has that barrier breaker, Inti, right?
Yeah.
Then he might very well also have splashed for something to break these AI hate cards.
Yeah.
Hard to say, especially as a code gate. I would think that if you were to splash one of the two, it would be a Century Breaker.
Yeah. I think right now this is like one of the more skill testing parts of Adam, because this is all about timing now, right? He's got to hit HQ if he chooses to hit there at exactly the right time, but he's got the best chance of seeing the agendas. So it's all about knowing like whether or not Gary is able to score out, whether or not Gary is confident in his ability to score out, and then just judging it. So, because if you leave it too late, that's when he does start scoring, and then the agendas aren't there
already built
anymore.
the server, and they're not there. So Chris going to take 6 credits and
there
then
is the Overmind.
Install the other Overmind with a lot of power counters on it. So I think he'll get 7 power counters on it.
Yeah, he's got a 8 MUO, -1 for the Overmind. I think they just noticed what those are daily casts. Yeah.
Right.
So that'll last a while, right? You can probably make 2 runs on HQ with that.
Right.
Which is, maybe fine. But it does still take those credits to get through VHG and the wall of static.
Dirty Laundry will be good to give him a boost. So that first run might probably be Dirty Laundry HQ.
Yeah.
And that'll give him a good idea of where Gary stands.
I don't think he's quite high enough on credits to do it right now, though, especially with the unknown ice.
Right.
So he's going to need to take a bit more money, and then I think he maybe starts going for it.
Is that an arc lockdown I see in Gary's hand?
Ooh.
Again, not sure that that's relevant, as we haven't seen any recursion, but...
I mean, there's often no harm in including just like a same old thing in an Adam deck like this. Maybe you are worried that your freedom for equality might get trashed.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't seen it.
So what's Gary's plan here? You're just looking
keep
for
on
more
icing
money
up,
and find that agenda.
Getting money. Oh, maybe he's going for it.
Okay, so here we go. Yeah, I was going to say, at this point, you might just be looking for the agenda to lie down. That's interesting, though. He puts it down the turn after he sees the icebreaker.
Yeah,
but this could very well be a bluff.
Chris puts the always be running back on, turns off Drug Dealer to save a credit, and now he's got a fairly reasonable shot at getting into a remote server.
Right. With 5 clicks.
Yeah. I wonder if this is a bluff, because if I was in Gary's position right now, unless I had like an Ash or something to go with an agenda, I would not be putting it in that server. That Overmind is very threatening. Or maybe it is a sneaky third Turing on the outside.
Yeah. But if you're Chris, do you maybe just Dirty Laundry Archives here? Because you know you can get in. And you'll see a card off the top of R&D, which may or may not help. But you also don't really have to spend any clicks to do that. You just have to spend 1 Overmind counter.
Yeah, spending an Overmind counter, you're spending your Dirty Laundry, you're getting back the money that you... Most of the money you spent to get in. Yeah. fine, but now he's made that decision to turn off the always be running. That says to me that he is going into one of those servers this turn, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so at that point, you might as well go at the remote.
Go at the remote,
so you can use
that.
that
Make
clip.
make a run, right? Yeah.
Gary looking through the heap, trying to count influence, I would imagine.
Can you count to 25?
Yeah, I think a tough decision here for Chris. We don't know what's in that remote right now. We didn't see it. So.
I am wondering if he sort of said, oh, I'll leave my always be running on or turn off my drug dealer, and then he's realized that maybe this is not an agenda.
Yeah. I think either way, I mean, Gary losing an agenda here, not the end of the world. If it's a GFI, you're in trouble, but I don't think you lie down a GFI.
Yeah, that would be very strange if he's just put a GFI down.
Yeah. But I think even if you lose a 3-2 here, you're okay.
Well, if you lose a 3-2 here, you lose the game. Freedom for equality is
in
in
right,
play.
Freedom is in play. All right, so never mind. You can't lose an agenda here.
Yeah, you can't lose an agenda.
I forgot about that.
Of course, if you score a 3-2 here, you're in a good spot because there's no longer a threat of losing the game on the next agenda.
So he's either very confident in that piece of ice, or as we suggested, it's a bluff. And I think we're all on the same page that it's probably a bluff at this point, or
at least not an agenda.
Upgrade. Right. It could be a caprice. That's not a bluff.
Looks like he's going into HQ. Is this? I'm not sure. He spent
2. Maybe thinking about playing the dirty laundry.
All right. Yeah.
So he's probably just doing the mental math right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. He's just figuring out what it would cost
to see what it would take.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, he's going to R&D.
Yes, he's going R&D. Yeah. So Gary must not have rezzed that first piece of ice. No, it's caprice.
Though.
Right.
Important side game.
Yeah.
Because, of course, if Chris gets in here, then R&D becomes a lot more vulnerable all of a sudden. And also, 2 cards, if he sees an agenda, wins the game.
That is good information, that caprice res. Otherwise, Chris may have used the E3 to break Fairchild. So not doing so saved him the credits he needs to do the side game. What do you bid here?
Always bid 1 as runner.
Okay.
That's my advice.
Yeah, costing the Corp 2 here isn't really setting the Corp back at all.
I just like to be dead on average. You know?
That's fair.
You never feel bad about paying 2.
If you always bid the
1.
same, then... Oh, interesting.
Well, I worked out well. I want to say fine for Chris. I mean, that's the best way to lose a side game, is to pay 0 on the Corp, pay 2, but...
Yeah, you certainly don't want to pay 2 and lose to 0.
Yeah.
But now you're on 3 credits.
Yeah, but now you've taxed out. You lost a lot of Overmind counters spent on that run as well.
With nowhere to go. It looks like he's just going to take 2 credits. So a pretty big window here for Gary. If that is an agenda, I think you score it out, of course. Nobody's going to wait for Chris to make sure to discard. Yeah. So there will be no safety first draw.
Shows how how little confidence Chris has now in his ability to make successful runs, I suppose.
So at this point, Gary maybe drops another piece of ice on that scoring server or just goes for it.
Yeah,
with 5 credits, Chris is not really showing much of a threat.
Yeah, Gary's still rich. It's definitely easy to protect the server. Got an ABT there.
2 ABTs.
2 ABTs, yep.
No biotic, so he'll have to do it the hard way, but...
And of course, if that install last turn was an Ash, or second Caprice or what have you, that is a very secure server now. And that's like, again, that's making the runner make a choice, and even if they choose to run it, they might trash the Ash, but they're spending so much to get in that it's fairly strong.
So yeah, Gary gonna take money, knowing that next turn he can just start going for it. And Chris still won't be able to get in. So Chris, if you're Chris now, you have to assume that they're in HQ.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, getting in there's a whole other proposition, but I think that's his only target. And the question is whether or not he can get in this turn. I don't know if he took his daily casts money. I think he did. He was
with the ice that is rezzed, I think you can fairly confidently get into HQ.
Right. So he'll just go for it. Yeah, click 1, always be running. Ravana. That is
This is still okay though, because you can spend a click and a credit here, click and 2 credits on Itchy, 2 clicks on Turing, and then Overmind through the wall of static.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
this could actually be it, because there are 2 agendas in HQ.
There are. So yeah, as you said, Chris, maybe not choosing so much as being forced into to going at the right time, really, for him.
Maybe he lets for Trace Fire?
He might let some Trace Fire. I don't think it really hurts you at this point.
Tag is fairly... how bad is the tag right now?
You lose Beth.
Losing Always Be Running is actually quite tough. And losing Beth is
that's
also
true.
quite tough.
If you lose Always Be Running, Turing all of a sudden becomes
really good again, yeah. Okay. So he's paying to break that as well.
And then double click.
And then there's the Overmind counter.
So
this could be it.
2 of the 5 cards. Yeah, he'll make room, just lay them down at the table. Chris finds it.
There
he
it
does.
is.
That's the game.
Wow.
That was
all about the timing on those HQ runs, and Chris timed that one pretty much perfectly.
Yeah, that was well done. Well played by him. And that was only the first half of this match. 45 minutes. Is that
that was quite a long game.
45-minute game.
I guess that's what happens when someone just tries to play defensively like that. And Adam forces you to do it so often.
Right, yeah. We saw the 1 Biotic. We didn't see another one from him. We didn't see any Sand City Grids.
Yeah.
So Gary really didn't have a choice but to try and ice up. And you saw 4 pieces of ice on HQ. Adam still got in.